For Clara, mornings were a ritual of bleary-eyed routine. The alarm, the stumble to the bathroom, the splash of cold water on her face. And then, the mirror. A simple, silvered pane of glass reflecting back her tired eyes, her messy brown hair, the familiar lines of her face. It was just her, or so she always believed. On this particular Tuesday, however, something felt infinitesimally, almost imperceptibly different. As Clara turned to grab her toothbrush, she caught a flicker in her peripheral vision. She paused, glancing back at the mirror. Her reflection was still looking forward, directly at where she had been standing a second ago, its eyes seemingly fixed on empty space. It was only for a heartbeat, then it snapped back, perfectly mimicking her now slightly confused turn. She blinked. "Too little sleep," she muttered, dismissing it. Throughout the day, Clara found herself unusually aware of reflections. The polished gleam of her office window, the dark screen of her computer when it idled, the shiny chrome of the coffee machine. Each time, she'd search for that fleeting strangeness. Once, while waiting for the elevator, she thought her reflection in the mirrored doors held its smile a fraction of a second longer than she did. A tiny, almost imperceptible upturn of the lips that wasn't her own. That evening, while making dinner, she was chopping vegetables at the kitchen counter. Her toaster, a gleaming stainless steel box, sat nearby. As she reached for a carrot, she saw her reflection in the toaster, her hand reaching, her knife glinting. But the reflected hand seemed to hesitate, to pause mid-air for a split second longer than her actual hand, before completing the motion. It was so quick, so subtle, she almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. Almost. The full-length mirror on her bedroom wardrobe door became a source of growing anxiety. She started avoiding it, dressing with her back to it, only glancing when absolutely necessary. One night, as she was about to turn off the lights, she dared a longer look. She stood perfectly still. Her reflection stood perfectly still, but its eyes, they seemed sharper, more focused, almost appraising. A few days later, Clara was having a particularly frustrating day. She'd spilled coffee on her favorite blouse, missed an important deadline, and had a minor argument with her sister. Returning home, exhausted and irritable, she threw her bag on the floor and slumped in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her own miserable face. And then she saw it. Her reflection, the one staring back with her own tired eyes, her own downturned mouth, slowly, almost imperceptibly, smirked. A cold, knowing little smile that sent a shiver of pure ice down her spine. Her own face did not move. Clara began a campaign of avoidance. She covered the bedroom mirror with a sheet. She used the tiny, cracked mirror in her old makeup compact if she absolutely had to see herself. She found herself walking down streets looking at the ground, terrified of catching her reflection in a shop window. But the avoidance bred obsession. The question gnawed at her. What was it? What did it want? One afternoon, desperate for a coffee, she braved a local cafe. As she waited for her order, she found herself staring blankly at the large gilt-edged mirror behind the counter. She was tired, her shoulders slumped. But her reflection, it stood straighter. It idly picked up a reflected sugar packet from the reflected counter, examined it, then put it down. Clara hadn't moved a muscle. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The reflection then turned its head slightly and seemed to wink at a reflected barista who wasn't really there. The bathroom became a place of dread. After a hot shower, the mirror would be completely fogged. One morning, as the steam began to clear, she saw letters forming in the condensation, as if traced by an invisible finger from the other side. 2 words. "I'm bored." Clara backed away, hands flying to her mouth, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Clara threw herself into frantic online research. Doppelgangers, fetches, spirit mirrors, tales of souls trapped in glass. Most were folklore, easily dismissed. But the sheer volume of stories, the ancient fear of reflections having their own malevolent will, began to erode her skepticism. The text she read spoke of reflections growing stronger, learning, wanting more than just to mimic, wanting to be. She noticed other changes, subtle at first. The reflection's hair seemed neater than hers, even when Clara's was a mess. Its clothes, though identical, seemed to fit better, to look sharper. One day, Clara wore a plain blue sweater. Her reflection wore the same blue sweater, but it had a small, intricate silver pin on the lapel, a pin Clara had never owned, never seen before. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Clara stood before her now uncovered bedroom mirror. "What are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The reflection looked back, its expression unreadable. Then it slowly raised a hand and tapped its own throat, then shook its head. It couldn't speak, or wouldn't. It then pointed at Clara, then pointed at itself, and then made a small, subtle gesture as if trying to push through something invisible. Clara started to truly watch her reflection, not just its mimicry of her, but its independent moments. When she wasn't looking directly, or when her attention was elsewhere, she'd catch it looking around its room, the mirrored version of hers. It would sometimes seem to touch the reflected walls, pick up reflected books, gaze out of the reflected window at a reflected world she couldn't see clearly. It was living a life, parallel and parasitic. The true terror began the night she saw it reach for her. She was exhausted, half asleep in her chair, her head lolling to the side, her eyes barely open. The bedroom mirror was in her line of sight. She saw her reflection, distinct and alert, slowly, deliberately raise its hand. Not mirroring her own lax arm, but reaching out, its fingers splayed, pressing against the cold, hard surface of the glass, as if trying to push through, trying to touch her. In a panic, Clara had thrown the nearest heavy object, a book, at the bedroom mirror. It struck with a sickening thud, not shattering it completely, but sending a spiderweb of cracks across its surface. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the cracked reflection, she heard it. A faint, dry, rasping sound, like a long-held breath being released, or perhaps a sigh of frustration. The reflection in the fractured glass looked angrier. The next day, Clara found a new message on her bathroom mirror, scrawled hastily in what looked like lipstick. Her lipstick, which she hadn't touched. "Let me out, we can share." Clara felt sick. Share what? Her life? Her body? The reflection in the cracked bedroom mirror now seemed to watch her constantly, its fractured gaze unblinking, waiting. Clara knew she couldn't live like this. One night, armed with a hammer, she stood before the cracked bedroom mirror. Her reflection, fractured and menacing, stared back. "This ends now," Clara whispered. As she raised the hammer, the reflection did something new. It smiled, a wide, predatory, triumphant smile. And then, its hand, the real, physical-looking hand of the reflection, began to push through one of the larger cracks, its fingertips emerging into her room, cold and pale. What happened next, Clara could never fully recall. There was shattering glass, a desperate struggle, a piercing coldness. When she came to, hours later, the mirror was a pile of jagged shards on the floor. Her hands were bleeding. She felt different, lighter perhaps, or hollower. She cleaned up the mess, bandaged her cuts, and avoided looking at any reflective surface for days. Weeks passed. No more strange movements, no smirks, no messages. Clara started to believe it was over. She bought a new, small mirror, just for necessities. She looked into it cautiously. Her own face looked back. Tired, yes. Haunted, certainly. But it was her. It mimicked her perfectly. Too perfectly, perhaps. There was an alertness in its eyes she didn't quite feel herself, a sharpness to its movements that felt practiced. One morning, as Clara finished brushing her teeth, she smiled at her reflection in the new mirror, a genuine small smile of relief. Her reflection smiled back, perfectly in sync. But as Clara turned away, if one had been watching the mirror very, very closely, they might have seen the reflection's smile linger for just a breath too long, its eyes holding a spark of something cold, something patient, something that knew it now had all the time in the world. After all, who was reflecting whom?